Good evening, CMST320. My name is Brendon Favre, and this is my discussion for chapters 3 and 4. For chapter 3, question 1, examine the various stages that can be used to combat a hostile work environment in the workplace. Identify them, discuss their drawbacks and benefits, and use the text to support your answers. All right, section 3 of chapter 3 states that it's not always what we say, but it's sometimes how we say it that can cause conflict in the workplace. We communicate non-verbally by means such as physical appearance, posture, movement, facial expressions, eye contact, and touch. In section 3.2.1, it states that using I language versus you language can help prevent some conflict in the workplace. It'll help prevent people from becoming defensive or hostile. For example, instead of saying you have an attitude problem, we can be more descriptive when talking to them and tell them exactly what we noticed about them, such as, I noticed that you rolled your eyes several times and had your arms crossed while I was talking. I feel that you're unhappy with me. By doing this, we're letting the person know exactly what it is that we saw and that it is affecting us. For me personally, I feel this might be a little bit too passive. I would prefer just to ask the person what the problem is, try to correct the issue and move forward versus beating around the bush and talking about feelings. In section 3.2.2, it states that you should ask rather than tell. The problem with this is people don't like being told what to do. They'll get defensive doing that. A lot of people don't want to be told what to do. I feel that this gives, the drawback I see with this is I feel it gives someone the option to say no. I feel the approach is a little bit more passive-aggressive than I normally take, and this is just a longer, nicer way of telling somebody what to do. You're still ending up at the same path. People need to have that division between leadership and employees at some point. We can't always be the nice guy. This is leadership, not likership. In section 3.2.3, it states that you should be genuine rather than manipulative. The book uses the example of being honest versus trying to make up excuses. If you are late, just admit that you're late rather than make up excuses. The benefit to this is honesty and trust. If I know that my employee's not BSing me, I know that, down the road that I can trust them, that they're going to be honest with me. People make mistakes. People run late. Things happen. Life happens. We can be understandable. It gets to the point where people start lying and making stuff up. They have a sick kid every day of the week and they don't even have kids, something along those lines. Two of the most important things I feel leaders need to have with employees is honesty and trust. I don't really see any drawbacks to this. I feel that it's, as long as we can be honest, straightforward, and trustworthy, that alleviates a lot of workplace issues. Next is going to be section 3.2.4, states that a leader should empathize rather than detach. This is important because you need to know what's going on in your employees' lives, especially, with soldiers. It was important that we know what was going on. We had a fast tempo for training, and it's a high-stress job. So you need to know, and you need to be able to pick up on those verbal and nonverbal cues with the soldier. If they're getting, or an employee, if they get kind of short with you in their answers, and they don't normally do that, if they're normally a real upbeat person and they're acting kind of down in the dumps or depressed or something like that, that's a good indicator that something might be going on. If someone's going through a hard time, it's important as a leader that you're able to identify it and address it in a manner that's helpful. You don't just want to blow them off. The last thing you want to do is tell them to get over it or figure it out on their own time. I know a lot of leaders in the military would tell soldiers to do that they need to work, and this isn't a time or a place for their personal issues. By doing this, you're showing people that they are important to you and the company, and they're not just a body that can be replaced. The drawback I see with this is that it can be very time-consuming trying to do all of these things, but I do feel it's worth the time. A happy workplace is a productive workplace, and I feel it's a responsibility of a leader to take care of their employees. In section 3.2.5, it states that a leader should be flexible instead of rigid. Just as in a leadership position, we don't have all the answers. We may feel like we have all the answers, but we don't. We might not always be right. Getting other points of view can help us understand other points of views or ideas, and this can help us grow as leaders. I don't really see any drawbacks to this one either, other than it can be a little time-consuming. It's a lot of talking, getting input versus just giving orders and driving on. Section 3.2.6 states that you should present yourself as an equal rather than a superior. I feel people know that you're in charge, so you don't really have to go out and flaunt it. If you're in a leadership position or if you're in charge of people, you don't have to rub it in their face or, anything like that. You're not in a position of dominance. You're in a position of leadership. Being humble will increase your leadership effectiveness and rapport with your employees. This is one thing I really tried to do when I was in the military. If my soldiers were down in the motor pool working, I was in the motor pool working. And that just means standing there watching them. It means getting my hands dirty, sweeping the line, cleaning gear, cleaning BII, painting stuff, doing whatever you need to get the mission accomplished. Many hands make light work. The drawback to this is that some people may get too comfortable, and sometimes leaders need employees to listen to them and do what's being asked of them. The reason I was able to take this approach with a lot of my soldiers is, one, because they had that respect for me and they knew that I was there to work, but they also needed to respect me. And in the same instance with this is, if it comes down to a combat or something like that, and I tell somebody that they need to clear this house or do something like that, I don't need them to tell me no. They need to do what I tell them to do and drive on. My soldiers knew that I would never put them in a position that I wouldn't put myself in first. So having that rapport with them is also good. So this can lead to disciplinary issues when they come up. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, but when soldiers would be going for punishment or something like that, they'd say, "I thought we were friends." Sometimes a degree of separation between leadership and employees is a good idea. I don't feel necessarily, especially in the military, with my soldiers, I never went out to the bars with them or anything like that. I'd buy them lunch and stuff like that on occasion, but beyond that, I try to keep things as professional as possible. All right, moving on to question 2. Discuss how nonverbal messages cross cultural boundaries when conveying information effectively. List a few steps by which we can prevent some of the nonverbal messages from being misconstrued. Cite the text in your responses. All right, in section 3.3, it states 93% of emotional meaning is in messages is communicated through nonverbal communication or nonverbal channels. The nonverbal messages that work in one culture may not work in another culture. Every culture has its own rules and standards for what is appropriate behavior and what is not appropriate nonverbal behavior. In section 3.3, it uses the example of the perception of a closed door. And in the French workplace, a closed door does not mean the same thing as it does in an American workplace. In France, office doors remain closed and can be easily opened by first knocking. The knock is simply a signal that one is entering the room. In America, in the workplace, a closed door usually means that the occupant is busy and doesn't want to be interrupted. The closed door is not opened until the occupant says to open it or they tell you to come in. In section 3.4, it states that our ability to use and interpret nonverbal messages effectively at work depends on our ability to recognize various sources of nonverbal messages, including physical appearance, vocal qualities, gestures, eye contact, space, use of time, touch, and the environment. In 3.4.5, by doing some research prior to working with a different culture, we can avoid doing things non-verbally that may come off as offensive. For example, in Asian cultures, being punctual is important to them. You don't want to be late. It's a sign of disrespect being late. So being on time or being early can be viewed as being respectful for them and showing them that you value their culture, their traditions, and their time. In 3.4.6, on the other side, we can also prepare ourselves for things that we may not be comfortable with. I know in a lot of Middle Eastern cultures, standing close to somebody, touching them, being in close proximity is normal for there, and whereas not in the U.S., we do like our personal space. This can also be referenced in 3.4.7. All right, moving on to Chapter 4, Question 1. According to our authors, what skills should people develop so they can become effective listeners? Describe various listening problems and their possible solutions. Cite the text in your answer. All right, first, it is important to understand the difference between hearing and listening. We may hear the sounds coming out of somebody's mouth, but that does not necessarily mean we're listening them. We have to be able to absorb and process the information. Section 4.1.1 defines listening as the process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to verbal and nonverbal messages. When we listen, not only do we hear the messages, but we also decode or assign them a meaning, and then we respond to the other person and let him or her know that the message was received. The listening process has 5 stages. Selecting, which is the message to focus on while blocking out other outside noises. So that means we're selecting the person we're listening to, and blocking everything out, such as noise pollution, emails that might be coming in, or just noise pollution from the outside, other people talking, other conversations, whatever that might be. All right, the next is attending, which is paying attention to the single message. So we're, again, just paying attention to that one person or whatever's being, video or whatever it might be. Understanding is assigning meaning to the message. Remembering is the ability to retrieve the message from memory, and responding, letting the person know that the message was received and understood. Some listening issues that the book talks about in section 4.1.2 are processing the information faster than it's being presented, which means you're processing the information, the speaker might be going really slow or answering questions or doing something else, and this can be an issue. You can start getting sidetracked, daydreaming, something like that. To avoid this, we can use nonverbal cues such as head nods to let the speaker know that we're engaged to them, we are listening, and then we can use a hand gesture, kind of like I'm doing right now, to show the speaker, hey, let's pick up the pace a little bit. Let's get moving here. We're kind of falling behind. You might be losing your audience a little bit. The next being too much information is being presented at one time. Nobody wants to be bombarded with a whole bunch of information, especially from PowerPoint or something like that, because our ability to retain that much information, we're probably not going to. To help with this, we can take notes, which is a big thing to do. I always try to carry a notebook or my phone or something with me to write something down. I got a terrible memory, so this really helps me quite a bit. That we can review later on, or we can ask the speaker to prioritize the information. So you're just getting the most important parts. Ask them for the abbreviated version. That might come off as a little disrespectful, but that again goes with knowing your employees and obviously catering that message to them and how they're going to respond to it. The next is trying to multitask and missing information. So everybody is busy and everybody wants to do multiple things at one time. I can tell you multiple times, I'm typing an email and trying to talk to somebody at the same time, and I start getting them all mixed up. What I'm talking about, I'll end up typing in the email, or what I'm trying to go across in the email, say back to them, or I'll just ignore them completely, which isn't appropriate. If you're engaging with somebody, especially face to face, that person needs to have your undivided attention. So to avoid this, we can commit to listening by paying attention and giving the speaker our undivided attention, which I said. Next, we're going to move on to question 2. Using the text to support your perspective. Explain the prevalence of competing messages at the workplace. Discuss the different strategies that can help you stop and turn off competing messages. All right, in section 4.2, it states that it's not always easy to turn off competing messages in the workplace. A lot of lateral and psychological noise distorts or interferes with the process of listening, such as cell phones ringing and vibrating, or worrying about meeting a deadline or an email you have to respond to, or what you're having for lunch today, or anything like that. Many of these can become listening barriers. So again, this comes to is you just need to give that person your undivided attention. To prevent this and to show that person that we're giving them their undivided attention, they use the acronym SOLER, SOLER. All right, the S is for squared and squarely face the person. That means you're facing them. You're not turned to the side. You're not facing your computer. You're directly facing that person. You want to orient your body toward that person. Next is the open body position. You don't want to have your arms crossed. You want to have your arms unfolded. You want to remove any obstacles or barriers between you and the person. If there's a desk in between you, you might want to move off onto the side, or if you have a sitting area in your office, something like that, move to a conference room, just where, you can have a more one-on-one, laid back, you're showing you're engaged with them type of a meeting, if that's the type of meeting you're trying to have. The L is lean toward the person. So if you're leaning in, you're showing them that you're engaged in them and that you're interested in what they're saying. A big one that I have, and I've noticed a lot of people have an issue with doing this or aren't able to do this for whatever reason, is eye contact. I always feel, and I've always raised, that when you're talking to somebody, you maintain eye contact with that person. I think I tend to kind of freak people out with this a little bit because I can stare a person down for an entire conversation and not even blink. It's just one thing that from childhood through my teenage years and my military career was just ingrained in me. You want to look directly at the person so they know that you are engaging them and it shows that you are paying attention to them. And the R is going to be for relax. Anxiety interferes with information processing. Try to be calm and focus on the speaker or the interaction between people. So if you're uptight or you're acting anxious, that can also lead to that person becoming anxious or, feeling like they have to rush through what they're doing because they don't want to waste your time or something like that. If you go into with a relaxed environment, that person is going to be more relaxed as well. If they're talking to you and you're the boss or the supervisor, they probably might be on edge a little bit, especially if they're a new employee or something like that. So you want to make it as comfortable as possible. Again, if that's what the situation dictates. All right, we also want to set the scene. This means holding the conversation in distraction-free areas such as like a conference room or in your office with a closed door, just something where, again, you're going to be isolated from other people or distractions, and it's going to set a scene to show the person that the time that you're taking is for them only. You're not doing other things during that time. It will mean a lot to that person. It'll show them that you care. We can also prepare ourselves in advance by taking a few minutes to mentally prepare ourselves before a meeting or a conversation. It'll give us a chance to transition from work mode into listening mode. So again, before any training meeting or anything like that, I would stop my work. I would go in there. I first would make sure everything was set up properly. We had a guy who didn't do a very good job, make sure the projector was set up and kind of all the NCOs paid for that. But, go in there, make sure everything's good to go. I would try to read through the PowerPoint slides beforehand on a printout just to make sure I was familiarized with what was going to be talked about in the training meeting so there was no surprises in there. Just that kind of stuff. Just mentally preparing yourself for the conversation before it happens can also lead to everything else falling into place. And that'll do it for this discussion. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening. Thank you.